What's going on, YouTube? This is SG1 Sports, and you're watching our college football channel. College football rankings, of course, now have been out. We know who's going to make the college football playoff, all of that. But in this video, I'm going to tell you what the rankings should have looked like, what I believe the rankings should have looked like if the committee followed the protocol that they were supposed to follow. And before I get into that, I maybe should have made a separate video about this, but and I said it in my reaction video, Alabama deserved to get in the college football playoff, but so did Florida State. And I said in that video, really, Georgia and Ohio State, they deserve to be in as well. The problem is just the system. A 14 playoff does not work. A 14 playoff's not really that much better than the old BCS, where teams that deserve to have a chance got left out. Well, teams still sometimes that deserve a chance to get in will be left out. So I'm so glad that we're moving to the 12-team playoff. It's going to be much, much better. But just the overall 14 playoff format, it just does not work. What if you have 5 Power 5 conference champions and they're all undefeated? How do you decide? I mean, there's no way to do that. It's just, and this whole best thing, is really just, I'm so tired of hearing that. The 4 best teams. How do you know one team is better than another team if they haven't played? You don't. You're just, I mean, you're guessing. Everyone thought that Oregon was a better team than Washington. What happened when they played on the field? I mean, Vegas is wrong all the time because we don't know who would win in a matchup until the two teams play. I don't know who is better between Florida State and Alabama. I believe that Alabama probably would win that game if Florida State's playing without Jordan Travis, but I don't know that. And so just this whole best thing, that's really just bothering me. It's a sport. You win and you play your way in. And the whole committee, the whole committee thing is just, it's just absurd, where we have 13 people deciding who the best teams are because of what? How do they know who the best teams are? Have these teams played each other? No, for the most part they haven't. So it's just, the whole thing is just ridiculous. I'm so glad we're moving to the 12-team playoff. I still don't like the committee. I don't think the committee should pick the at-large teams in the 12-team playoff, but at least you have a chance to play your way in. All the Power 5 teams, if you win your conference championship, you will be in. And really, if you don't win your conference championship and you lose a couple of games, well, I mean, you shouldn't have lost a couple of games. Now, I do find it interesting, though, before I get into these rankings, I was looking through the website, and they talked about the importance of every game mattering in the regular season. That's on the website. They know the significance, the importance of every game mattering in college football, the uniqueness of college football. Every game matters. Florida State won every game. Alabama did not win every game. That's just, I thought that was interesting. But if you go on there, again, I don't really, I think the committee got it wrong, like I said, but I don't think there was a right answer, and I don't really have a problem with what they did. And I think they can justify it if you go through and you look at all their protocol. It says that they will need to select the 4 best teams from among several with legitimate claims to participate. Alabama has a legitimate claim to participate. So does Florida State. Well, they have to decide from those teams based on who they think is the best. And then you go through their main protocol says it'll be instructed to place an emphasis on winning conference championships, strength of schedule, and head-to-head competition when comparing teams with similar records and pedigree. Why is that word in there, pedigree? That's a big advantage for Alabama right there, right? Treat final determination like a tiebreaker, apply specific guidelines, and then again it goes through the other things. Championships won, strength of schedule, head-to-head if it occurred, compare outcomes of common opponents without incenting margin of victory. Again, that's something you're not supposed to look at, margin of victory. And then if you go and you look at the principles, where they kind of go a little bit further, and I don't know if this has always been worded like this. I would like to go back and look. I mean, they may have changed it this year, I don't know, but they say that the committee will select the teams using a process that distinguishes among otherwise comparable teams by considering conference championships won, strength of schedule, head-to-head competition, comparative outcomes of common opponents, again without incenting margin of victory, and this is not on the main part. You have to go over here to the other part where you have the principles. That word's interesting here as well, principles. Other relevant factors such as unavailability of key players and coaches that may have affected a team's performance during the season. So So that's actually talking about if you had a player injured during the season and you lost, the committee could forgive that loss. But then, and this, I don't remember reading this in years past. Maybe it has been there and I just don't remember it. But then it says, or likely will affect its postseason performance. And that, of course, is where they catch Florida State. But again, I'll get more into the Florida State-Alabama argument in just a second. Just looking at all of this, you can see why they did what they did. I don't think it's a conspiracy to get the SEC in or ESPN and all this stuff that I keep hearing. I don't really buy that. I think they got it wrong, like I said the other day, but there are ways they can justify it. Again, legitimate claims to participate. Alabama has a legitimate claim. Florida State has a legitimate claim. Texas has a legitimate claim. And they think that Alabama is the better team. It's just, it should be settled on the field, and you cannot settle Florida State, Alabama without the teams playing on the field. And that's why, again, this is just a terrible format when you have a 14 playoff and you have teams that did everything that they could have done, scheduled a Power 5 powerhouse, an LSU, played a rivalry game against Florida, won every game, did everything that you could do. That should be enough. I don't care what happens everywhere else. And again, if all 5 Power 5 teams went undefeated, that should be enough. They should all 5 be in, and that's why a 14 playoff does not work. So I can't wait for the 12-team playoff. And again, maybe should have done a separate video for that little ramble, but let's get into the rankings now. We'll start with 21 through 25, and I'm going by the committee's protocol here. This is what it should be. I have no idea why Kansas is not ranked. Kansas should absolutely be ranked. I think you can make an argument for Kansas over Kansas State and maybe even over Clemson and Tennessee. They've got a pretty good resume. They've got a win over Oklahoma, and that's a big-time win. And here's the thing. You go back to the injuries. They had injuries at the quarterback position during the season in some of their losses. I can't remember those games exactly. I think that one of them was Kansas State. And so the committee is supposed to take that into account, and they should get the benefit of the doubt. And with only 4 losses and a win over Oklahoma, Kansas should be ranked. Liberty really, I think Kansas should be ahead of Liberty and Kansas State as well. Kansas State has a win over Kansas. Liberty doesn't have any wins over Power 5 teams. And if there was another Power 5 team that I felt like should be in here, I don't think Liberty should even be ranked, but I think they have to rank. I mean, they have to rank a Group of 5 champion. And so I've got Liberty ranked. SMU had 2 opportunities against Power 5 teams. Liberty had none. It's penalizing SMU for playing 2 Power 5 opponents is not ideal, but one of those was TCU, and they weren't very good this year, and SMU really didn't compete very well in that game, and that's the difference. If they had went down to the wire against TCU and maybe played Oklahoma a little bit tougher, I think there would be a much better argument for them ahead of Liberty. So again, inconsistency right there with the committee, just kind of lazy. I think Kansas should be ranked. If they really looked into it and went through their protocol, Kansas should be ranked. All right, 16 through 20, Iowa. I've got them a little bit lower than where they should be. They just don't have any real quality wins. So there's really no reason for Iowa to be ranked ahead of some of these other teams. Oklahoma State, Oregon State, NC State, Notre Dame ahead of them. NC State's kind of been just overlooked. I mean, just no love for NC State. And I mean, I'm not just talking about with the rankings. I'm just talking about in general. Nobody's talked about NC State. They had a really good year. They were 9-3, and I think they should be at number 17. And then we've got 11 through 15. Louisville at 15, Arizona at 14, LSU at 13, Oklahoma at 12. Oklahoma has the great win over Texas, but you have to look at the losses. Their losses were a little bit worse than some of those other 2-loss teams. And then you've got Penn State in there at 11. So yes, I have Missouri and Ole Miss ahead of Penn State. Again, when you look at comparing these teams, it's also interesting that the word resume is never used. Quality wins is never used. Who you lost to, never used. It's actually just strength of schedule, which kind of plays into the resume. But if you look at Penn State's strength of schedule, it's way behind Ole Miss and Missouri. And then you also look at who they beat. I mean, they have the win over Iowa. That's it. I mean, they don't have any other quality wins. An 8-4 West Virginia is pretty good, but West Virginia's not ranked. That's, I guess, probably their next best win. After that, maybe Rutgers. I mean, they just don't really have the quality wins, and their strength of schedule is not very good. So I have Ole Miss and Missouri ahead of them. Again, their losses were to really good teams. That's why I've got them ahead of Oklahoma. even though, again, that's really not what's in the criteria. So maybe I'm even wrong here. I guess when I did this, I should have put all the strength of schedules down and all the teams that didn't have head-to-head or common opponents. I probably should have just went by strength of schedule, because that's ultimately what's on the protocol. Penn State, again, they're at number 11, and then we move ahead to Missouri at 10, Ole Miss at 9. You look at common opponents, Ole Miss beat LSU, Missouri lost to LSU. That's the difference. Ole Miss should be ahead of Missouri and Penn State, in my opinion, if you go by the common opponents and all that, strength of schedule, all those things. Georgia, Ohio State, and Oregon, I believe they are in the right spots. I think the committee got it right with those teams. But if we're talking about best 4 teams, I think Georgia's a better team than Washington. I think Georgia's probably a better team than Michigan. I mean, it's just I cannot stand that the best 4. Think about in college basketball, if you had a mid-major conference tournament, the winner of that goes to the NCAA tournament, and you get to that final game, and one team's had a great year, and everyone thinks they're the better team, and they go out there and they shoot 0 for 20 from 3 and just have a terrible shooting game, and they wind up losing by 1 at the buzzer. Imagine the selection committee in basketball saying, well, look, Team B, you won your conference championship. That's great. But we think Team A is better. They just had a bad game. We think they're the better team. So they're going to go to the NCAA tournament, not the other team. Just think about the absurdity of that. And it's not exactly like that here, because Alabama and Florida State didn't play each other. But like Georgia and Alabama, imagine if they had put Georgia in instead of Alabama. Of course, there would be outrage. It's just the games have to matter. And one of my big problems here with Alabama getting in, and let's just go ahead and show you. This is what I think the top 5 should look like. I've actually got Washington at number 1. They have a better strength of schedule than Michigan. They have better wins. If you look at all their wins, Washington should have been number 1. There was really no reason for the committee to put Michigan. And get this, all this about the passing attack for Florida State. In Michigan's second best win against Penn State, guess how many passes they threw in that game? They threw 8 passes. They threw 8 passes in their second biggest win of the season against a top 10 team, according to the committee. And that's the team that the committee has at number 1. But not Florida State. They won without throwing the football. But that's a totally different story there. It's just absurd. Florida State should be at number 3 because of what they did without Jordan Travis. And you look at, again, I talked about this the other day. Look at what they did in their rivalry game with Tate Rodemaker on the road at Florida. Look at what Alabama did in their rivalry game at Auburn with Jalen Milroe. So we're talking about, comparing what these teams would look like in the college football playoff. And Auburn and Florida, very similar teams. Florida State, a much better performance than Alabama. I mean, that's what we have actually seen. Louisville's a good team. I know Florida State didn't play great in that game, but they had a quarterback starting in that game that will not play in the college football playoff, or would not play, because Rodemaker would be the starter. And so they really didn't follow their protocol, because you should be looking at that game and say, well, their passing attack would have been better with Tate Rodemaker, the player that will be on this team in the college football playoff. And that's really where I have a problem. And my other problem here is the fact that Texas went on the road and beat Alabama. They went on the road and beat them by 10. And now they may potentially have to play them and beat them again. And that at the end of the day, when I really look at this, that's why I do not think that Alabama should be in the college football playoff and Florida State should be, because I don't think that's fair to Texas. Imagine, what do you do there? Does Texas claim a national championship? Because, hey, we beat the national champions on their home field. That really bugs me. And going all the way back to 2011 when that happened with LSU and Alabama, that bugged me, because LSU went into Tuscaloosa and beat Alabama. Then they had to do it again. They had to beat them again. And that right there is just something that I do not like about how this played out. Again, the committee, I think, can justify their actions based off of some of the things that I read off earlier. I still don't think it's right, and this is what the rankings should look like. So what do you think? Give me your thoughts down in the comments below.